Neil Slater of Aberdeen, thank you very much indeed for taking part in our MasterMinds interview today. You've had an extensive career in financial services, and most notably also in the last 11 years within the global real estate investment space. You've lived in Switzerland with Man Group, in Japan with Standard Life, and right up to the point at which the merger took place with Aberdeen. You are currently Global Head of Real Estate for Aberdeen, Global Head of Real Assets for Aberdeen, which you joined in 2017. And more recently, you took on the wider global brief of Head of Real Assets, responsible for 49 billion AUM in real assets, of which 43 billion pounds worth of AUM in the real estate space. And you're responsible for circa 350 people across 12 countries. Welcome to Ferguson Partners MasterMinds interview. Thank you very much indeed for taking part.
Thanks, Charlie, and real pleasure to be here.
We put together a few questions that we'd like to ask you between Serena and me. And I think just as an opening gambit, we'd love to have a summary from you as to what your sort of early life influences were and have been over your career to date.
So I think, like many people, your family and your upbringing, of course, has a really key role to play in probably your future direction in your career. And I had two very hardworking parents, and suppose I was brought up with a very strong work ethic, in many respects, which is clearly rubbed off on me. And also, I remember as a child, we moved around, every 4 or 5 years with my father's job as he kept getting promoted. And it's kind of interesting looking back because you think about that impact on perhaps the ability to, move countries or move house, a number of times in your career. And I do think there's a kind of link there, just probably that work ethic, that flexibility that probably has rubbed off somewhere along the lines.
Well, how many countries did you live in while you were growing up? Did that help you make decisions?
Yeah, well, fascinatingly, it was only the UK, but we lived in a number of locations in England and Scotland. And so, as I said, probably, I think I moved 3 times by the age of 9 or 10. And then, kind of settled down for senior school, really. And I just think that kind of link made me very relaxed or open when it came to actually moving myself. I went straight to London from university and then, had the opportunity to get to Zurich, and I didn't really think twice about it if the challenge and the opportunity was the right thing.
And of course, it must be a massive cultural difference in Japan as well. I just wonder, between the experiences of working in Switzerland and in Japan, what are the sort of best practices that you've learned in those different cultures that you've been able to bring across to Aberdeen?
Yeah, that's a super question, and it's one of the really fascinating things about working internationally is cultural differences, and those are 2 really unique countries. Obviously, Japan, very interesting from a cultural perspective. A series of islands which themselves are very far away. There's been a lot of books written about Japanese culture, about business culture, about industrial culture. It was really interesting for me to go in as someone. I arrived with nothing, 6 laptops in my hold to build the business and then merge and hand over to a successor. And for me, it was all about listening and being very respectful and understanding that actually I didn't come from that background. By the end, there was a team of 50, 55, and there was only myself and one other that were gaijin, that were non-Japanese. And you go through this journey of, how do you recruit? How do you market yourself? How do you hire people? How do you retain people? So that's fascinating. Completely different experience in Switzerland, where I was in Zurich, obviously German-speaking part of Switzerland. I would say, broadly speaking, a very direct culture. And of course, in Japan, many things are done outside of the meeting room. And that was also a culture and a team that was very international. So people from all around the world, but mainly Western cultures, UK, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So I think this is one of the really exciting things about our business and working internationally. 'Cause there's so many cultural nuances between France and the UK and the US and in many Asian countries. It's very nuanced.
I was going to ask Neil, and some of these are more general questions, but what were the defining points in your career that you think have got you to your current position?
So I think, without a doubt, it's that whole transition from kind of, if you like, a technical expert into a broader leadership role and then a wider leadership role. And if I just think that through, those were really transformative experiences for me. So to go from, I was a fund manager, quite technical, running a team, but very focused on debt, real estate debt or other types of debt. And then the move to Japan was a real transitional experience for me, because it really opened my mind up to the breadth and importance and possibilities of a broader leadership role. And that was a journey that took me on, running a business. So yes, there was real estate there. Yes, there were other asset classes, but you had everything: HR, finance, ops. Who had the keys to the office in the morning, and it really teaches you a lot about running a business, and then coming back into a global role where the team's bigger. Okay, it's more siloed and it's an asset class, but it's still a business. With the P&L, and you're thinking about all the different things about clients, how the business is run, about people, and so that kind of journey, as I was kind of think it through, is what you start, and then that's what I guess I've been on, and I've been very lucky to have had those experiences.
We're going off piste a bit here, but did you already identify that you were looking for a C-suite role early in your career, or was that something that happened organically?
Yeah, it's just a great question. So probably more organically. So I if I really think about the early part of my career, it was all about that getting on, challenging yourself, work ethic, wanting to get on to the next challenge. And I find myself the kind of person I am, every 2-3 years, you'd need the next thing. And then I was invited to join a leadership program at work at Aberdeen, what was at that time Standard Life Investments. And I thought of it was just going to be another managerial program. That ultimately led to me getting the chance to move to Japan. Because someone said, look, we think you can do more. And actually leadership or, going further in an organization is it is a profession. It's a learning experience. It's constant challenges. And probably if it hadn't been for that, I would have maybe just thought about just being the technical leader the whole time and staying in that role. So I guess an organic internal course that then led me to that opportunity.
You obviously came into the industry from outside of real estate, and now you've adopted the broader real assets role. How's that been for you, adapting to running a business that is so largely real estate centric?
Yeah, it's been great. I think, firstly, we recognise that the core of the business is real estate. Fantastic franchise, a long history. The benefits of the real assets connection is, if you think about the evolution of real estate, infrastructure, the built environment, and what we're seeing and what we have seen over the last 10 years, there's so much connectivity that, and it's in both the equity and the debt side, that I think it's really interesting. It's then thinking about how can you connect that in the right way for the benefit of clients. So firstly, I think I've been really excited to take it on. I think it's really relevant. I was reading this morning in the newspaper, for example, about water, water usage demand in both infrastructure and real estate. Simple example. That's fascinating. If you think about those asset classes generally and the impact we have on society and how we can really make change, that's the great thing. And as someone who hasn't, I'm not, as you said, I'm not a surveyor by training. I came from a different background, but I think that's great because I think the way the industry is evolving, we need lots of different types of skill sets, I think, across real assets and across real estate to really, I think, continue to evolve it and to deliver it for clients and also for the humans that ultimately use the assets as well.
And just actually on that point, Neil, I know that ESG is a large part of Aberdeen's investment strategy. How have you found integrating and overlaying the ESG component to your investment strategies?
It's absolutely an ongoing journey. And the reason I say that is we take it really seriously. We've got I can talk very eloquently about it. We've embedded environmental engineers within the investment process. But the thing we're learning is that it's always a journey, because the market's evolving, targets are evolving. I strongly believe the next couple of years, given what we've just seen with weather patterns, water usage, etc., is going to put more pressure on the industry to demonstrate that it's doing the right thing. So the reason I use that word journey at the beginning is we're all really passionate about it within the team, and you'll hear and you'll see that when you meet people and you get them to talk about what they're doing with the assets. But it's not easy, and you need the right skill sets. Yeah, you need a great education program for teams to make them feel good about it and to make people feel empowered. But I think the industry is going to have to step up even more than it probably realizes. So hence the journey part. I think we're going to see more of this. I think we're going to have to invest more in the talent in the ESG area over the coming 5 years.
And moving away from the technical piece and thinking about the broader general management skills that you have, what do you think are the sort of personality traits that you have that are evident in your firm's culture? And to what extent do you think the firm's culture is part of its success?
For me and the team, I think there's a couple of key things. I'm quite I tend to have quite a strategic, but then shift to action orientation, and I think you probably see that within our culture, in that idea of not being afraid to take a step back and making sure that we're thinking about where we're going, we're thinking about the competitive landscape, we're thinking about what's happening in the next 5 years. But you know what? When we know, then let's execute, let's go, let's make it happen, let's come with some energy, with some enthusiasm and some dynamism, and if you like, enact.
Yeah.
And I feel that we have that within the team. And the other thing is this team culture that we have, which I'm very proud of. Which we don't have any star fund managers, or of course people do great jobs that gets called out, but we've got a real team ethos.
Yeah.
So I think you see that absolutely within our real estate and real assets business. The broader organization, we're a very vast organization with different, as you know very well, different asset classes, but also different types of business lines, institutional, personal, retail. I mean, it goes without saying, I don't need to tell you this, that culture is key. And if the culture is not there, the organization dies. And we have a really interesting culture. We have a varied culture because, of course, of various mergers and acquisitions over the years. One of the key things I think about this culture is the team approach that we have that really emanates right throughout Aberdeen. And you'll see it with everyone you touch. And I've always liked that certainly about the culture here. And I just think that's really important.
And as you consider all of the impacts across the business, what's the 3 a.m. topic that wakes you up, keeps front of mind?
I think there's a few things. There's probably I always think of kind of the immediate things that keep you awake. Then there's those medium-term issues. Then there's the leadership issue. So the short-term things are markets. We're in a very interesting market dynamic right now. This is not 2008. It's not 1991. It's an inflationary environment. It's a recessionary environment in some areas. So it impacts the business cycle. So what does that mean for the asset classes we look after? And it's kind of quite great. There's a lot of fog at the moment. And that's concerning because we know that, given where yields are at on some sectors, there should be some valuation changes. But at the same time, there's still significant demand. If you think about the human element, so real estate, very correlated to the macro environment, but it's entirely correlated to humans, how we live, how we work, how we consume. So that part keeps me awake because it's more short-term. Medium-term is more, I'd say, the industry, the competitive landscape, how the industry is evolving, how technology is evolving. Are we behind? Are we there? And then the third element, you may be surprised to find there's 3 things that keep me awake. But the other thing is just that kind of what I would call the leadership question, which is you sometimes wake up and you ask yourself, are you doing a good enough job? Are you looking after your people enough? Are you showing up enough? Are the things you should be doing differently? And I think that's natural, but it's that's the kind of thing that you sometimes wake up and ask.
And on the subject of leadership, Neil, what do you identify as the key characteristics for successful leadership?
So I think there's a number of things. I think there's some core attributes that I believe are really important that are not surprising at all. I do think you need to be a strategic thinker or have a strategic mindset. That can be many things, but someone who really can take a step back, think about where the industry is at, think about where the business is at. Because if you're not doing that, how can you lead? I do think, and this is my style, having some energy, some dynamism, some passion, I think is important to take people with you. But of course, you don't want to have too much of a positivity bias because you're running a business. But I think there's other things that are coming to the fore over the last 5 to 10 years that I think weren't relevant 20 years ago or 25 years ago when I started my career. So I think you have to be a really good listener. I think there's more of a humbleness that's come into leadership than probably was there in the past. So that you are taking that time to reflect and listen and not just bring people along with you, but making sure that you're utilizing the teams and the skill sets around you. So it's probably a long-winded way of saying strategic, energetic, great, but a bit more humbleness than probably maybe we had 25 years ago. But always you have to be a very good listener. I think that's really key.
And as you look to constantly enhance that sort of gene pool, if you like, within the real assets business and the team, what are the other industry sectors that you might consider diversifying to attract people from in order to continue that broad thinking?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier about how real estate's evolving, and I really believe the industry is so different now than even it was 10 years ago. And you saw this in the hedge fund industry 20 years ago and how that was evolving. I think you need this whole raft of skills within real estate. Yes, surveying, expertise on land, expertise on development, all the areas you would expect. But if you think about what we've just been talking about, environmental, societal, the different ways we impact, actually, we need people who understand technology, who understand environmental impact, who understand how to build, who understand finance and debt and capital structures and term sheets. And so I'm a real believer in the potential of talent. And just because someone isn't an accountant on their certificate doesn't mean to say they can't read a P&L. And moving people around in the right way. So we've got some wonderful transactional lawyers by background, one in particular who's now running all of our borrowing for us in real estate, because he came from that background and he wanted to move on the commercial side, and we put him on a training program, and he's a deal person. It's fantastic. We've got some wonderful real estate surveyors, developers in the business. We absolutely need more of them, but I'm convinced you will see an even greater need for data technicians, for biodiversity experts, etc., across the business over the next few years, as the LPs become even more focused on what they need from the built environment.
Okay, and those presumably aligned to operating companies that you've invested in.
Well, yeah, actually, that's another thing. So we've just hired for the first time 2 operating individuals on the student accommodation side. It's a great point, actually, Charlie, because one of the things we feel that we don't have enough of is probably don't have enough tech experience in that data side, if I think about all the data we have. And the operating side, the asset class is becoming so much more operational, which is where the link with infra becomes very interesting. And in that regard, do we have enough people in the business that have that operating experience that can really think about, from the business angle? So it's, a lot of different attributes to think about.
Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, we're probably close to the end of our session, but just wanted to ask 2 final questions. What's the future for Aberdeen's real assets business, and what are your crystal ball predictions, therefore, for 2023?
So, future for Aberdeen real assets and real estate is to absolutely continue this journey we've been on. I've been in here 3 years now in October, and it's about ensuring that this business is relevant for clients in the future. So ensuring that this business is here in 10 years' time. That's what matters. So you've seen us obviously do some M&A, sell some businesses, bring in some new talent. That journey has to continue because it's a great core business, but it's got fantastic potential. And so hence, it's about a journey to ensure this is a relevant business for clients. That's what matters. And it needs to be sustainably profitable. And then in terms of the crystal ball, I think we're in for a tough, not this business, the industry is in for a tough 12 to 24 months. We talked about those kind of foggy clouds, if you like. How quickly our valuation is going to change given the interest rate environment. We're already seeing one or two developers that have gone under in continental Europe. And so I just feel that given the macro environment, the interest rate and inflationary environment, there'll be pockets of the sector that do really well. But you will see, I think, some valuation softening, and you will see some opportunities, actually, I think, from a business perspective, maybe even a buyout perspective, that come out of this in the next 12 to 24 months. But what I firmly believe in is that despite that, that's the macro side. I was talking to someone the other day, those human trends I mentioned, about how we're consuming, how we're living, how we're working, those are not changing. And so actually the investment theses that you've seen over the last few years and the trends, they remain absolutely relevant. Power, energy, onshoring of logistics, the residential issues we have in the UK and in other countries, etc. I think the environmental aspects of the built environment, they don't change. And so choppy 24 months, but I think we're in for a really interesting, 3 to 5 years thereafter.
Neil, thank you very much indeed for taking part in this discussion today, and appreciate all of your time and look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thank you. No, thanks for asking me. It's been a real pleasure to take part.